You know, MJ or marijuana, I'm so familiar with it, I call it MJ, is fascinating Americans. It's become a multi-billion dollar industry and expected to be even bigger in the years to come. We've asked Bob Anderson to come aboard. He's an attorney in New Jersey who knows an lot about what's happening in New Jersey, which is both which will affect small business people and people who want to be in the industry, and not only in New Jersey, but other states are taking some of their cues from the state efforts. So we asked Bob Anderson to come on board and kind of give us an overview of how MJ works and how perhaps some of our listeners can enter into the field. Bob, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I should just briefly say, I'm with Lindaberry McCormick, Estabrook and Cooper. We're a 50 attorney firm headquartered primarily in central New Jersey with offices in Manhattan and Pennsylvania as well, but we work around the country. And in fact, internationally, we're part of a network of law firms around the world. And I serve on the management committee and was the former president of the network. So we do deals around the world. But for today, we're focusing on MJ. And I guess the first thing to just mention about that is that although New Jersey and 17 other states have legalized recreational cannabis, it is still illegal at the federal level. And that raises a lot of complications for any business that wants to get involved in this. Among other things, you have the issue that because it's illegal at the federal level, banks that open up bank accounts for businesses in the cannabis industry can be deemed under federal law to be involved in fostering criminal enterprises. And they can potentially lose their FDI insurance participation if they engage in businesses that they knowingly are involved in a criminal enterprise, which as far as the federal law is concerned is cannabis. So virtually no national banks will let you open a bank account. They won't let you have a credit card account. It makes these into cash businesses in many cases, unless you can find a small local bank that's willing to bank with you and open things up for you. But that's a difficulty for small businesses trying to get into this, that they can't pay their employees with checks. They can't take checks from clients. They have to take cash. They end up paying their employees in cash. And so that's one barrier to entry. And one more thing at the federal level, just to mention, is the tax code also has provisions that if you're engaged in an illegal criminal business, you can't deduct your business expenses. So the IRS is happy to take your money, but they will not let you take tax deductions on your tax returns. So you're paying taxes on the full gross revenues that your business is taking in, more or less, which is, again, another barrier to small businesses getting into this. But, one thing that New Jersey has done in order to try to protect small businesses is they have recognized that when this is opened up in other states, recreational cannabis, that there's been a tendency for these large out-of-state operators in Colorado, California, Massachusetts, wherever they may be. They have a lot of experience in this industry, and they also have developed a lot of capital because they've been successful over the past several years. Whereas the people in New Jersey who are just starting out in this, almost by definition, aren't allowed to have any experience in this industry. They may have more limited access to capital. And therefore, the concern was that when this opened up, that it was just going to be taken over the entire industry, which is expected to be about $2 billion, fairly shortly, just in New Jersey alone, apart from what it is all around the country. That it was going to be taken over by large out-of-state operators. And so one thing that New Jersey did, and I think some other states, if they move forward on this path, may, look to New Jersey to see how this goes, they have decided that they are going to give at least 25% of all the licenses to operate a cannabis business to what are called micro businesses. And they have 6 different categories of licenses that you can get, whether it's cultivators or retail sales or delivery people. But within each category of license, a minimum of 10% have to go to these micro businesses. And a micro business is a company that has to has to be owned entirely by people who have resided in New Jersey for at least 2 years. And so that gives people who have lived here, even though they don't have experience in the industry, sort of a foot in the door. You're subject to certain restrictions on size, the amount of floor space that you can have. You can't have more than 10 employees. And most of your people that are involved in your business have to live in the town that your business is going to operate out of, or an adjoining town, which means it has to be a local business and focused on people who have lived there for several years as well. And the plan is that this will sort of foster the ability of these small businesses to get licenses and not be entirely crowded out by the big out-of-state operators. And the thought is that other states, if they move forward with legalization, could try to do something as well to try to protect small businesses. And also on another level, one thing that New Jersey has been very concerned about in their lawmaking and regulations is they want to foster the ability of certain groups that, maybe have been hurt by the war on drugs over the years. It could be people who have prior cannabis convictions, people, in minorities who have disproportionately maybe been impacted by the war on drugs, that they want to give them a leg up in trying to get involved in this industry. And so in addition to the micro business arrangements, there's also provisions put in place that will foster, if you are majority owned by groups that are recognized minorities under the New Jersey statute, or majority women-owned businesses, or majority disabled veteran-owned businesses, that they will get certain preferences. They will get put to the top of the pile when these applications come in. Even if applications come in later, if you fit within those appropriate categories, also if you come from certain disadvantaged, economically areas of the state, your applications can get put to the top of the pile and you'll get processed before, many others just making a general application will come through. And the hope is that this will help to foster, not only small businesses throughout the state, but also small minority businesses, small disabled veteran businesses, small women business enterprises, and that, this can be something that can be a, sort of a benefit for them that helps to give them a little bit of a leg up when maybe in some areas of business, they haven't had that leg up in the past.
That is a really good shorthand. Before we go further, your website where people can learn more?
Our website is lindabury.com, LINDABURY.com.
Boy, that's a nice, easy one.
Yeah. Well, when you got this many names in the name of your firm, you got to cut it down to something simple.
Well, that's a great one. Well, listening to you, it's as you know, I sat on the board of one of the original 6 nonprofits, which are now profitable. But we were integrated. But in New Jersey, they've decided to limit the integrated operations and split out. Do you think that's a good idea? And if so, how can it benefit small small business people?
Mm-hmm. Well, initially, there was opportunities, on the medical side for, certain providers to sort of have that vertical integration where you can go from cultivation to packaging to retail sales. In this case, retail sales pursuant to a prescription, but there was those opportunities. Now the state wants to try to break that up somewhat in the recreational field, so that, and I think the concept here, although I'm not sure it has ever been fully explained, but I think the concept is they want to broaden the opportunities for small businesses to get involved. And that would be, you know, you're not going to be able to have, you know, one business, at least initially, the first couple of years of these operations, that's going to be the cultivator and the packager and the wholesaler and the retail store and the delivery. They're not going to be able to own all those licenses. They're, for the most part, going to be limited to one type of license, and there's some exceptions to that. But generally, they want to have each business focus on a portion of the market. And the concept is, I think, that many more businesses can get involved, and you can have many more small businesses flourish, as opposed to, you know, large groups or groups, you know, that may be particularly well financed being able to take over the entire market. Those groups will do fine by themselves. You know, they will do well in this market, I'm sure. But the concept here is to protect small businesses that are sort of in startup mode, that they can each have a niche and fulfill their little portion of that niche. So there'll be less vertical integration, basically, at least in the initial stages. You know, that may change over time, but for the first 2 years that this is out there, I think they want to significantly limit that kind of vertical integration.
Bob, where does your company come into? Where does your practice come in? And what do you provide to people?
What we do, and we've been advising various companies that are looking to come into this space. The state passed a referendum back in November that said we're okay with legalizing cannabis, recreational cannabis in some form. And then it took a number of months to actually get that passed into a statute back in February. And then it was only last week, a week ago today, that the first regulations to start to implement this were published. And we've been, you know, there was a 230-page statute. So we were the ones who read the statute and helped advise people on the ins and outs of that and where their potential business might fit within it. And then the first round of regulations were another 160 pages. So we're advising them on those and basically helping them with the licensing process. You know, there's also a municipal component of this, that if you want to operate a business, obviously you have to locate it someplace. And towns were given under the statute 180 days from a date back in February to opt out of allowing cannabis businesses in their municipality, or to put restrictions on it, like a number of the maximum number or the type that they would allow. And many towns, in part because they haven't even seen the regulations of how this is all going to work, were nervous that if they didn't pass some kind of limitations like that, and the deadline was this past Saturday, that for a 5-year period, they were not allowed to pass any new restrictions. So if they passed restrictions before this past Saturday, at that point, they can roll back the restrictions at any point at leisure. But if they didn't pass something, the town was going to be open to cannabis businesses generally for the next 5 years. So I think probably about 200 towns passed ordinances, you know, significantly restricting or entirely banning the operation of these cannabis businesses. So the other element of this is finding a town that is amenable to you opening a business and working with them. And you'll also have to get, you know, potentially zoning approvals, possibly variances of one sort or another. And I don't do that personally, but again, we have a 50 attorney firm, and, you know, we handle zoning and variance work and things like that. So those are the two main areas, I would say, where we help in sort of this licensing and startup business arrangement. The other element of this, though, that is also out there is that employers now have to deal with employees potentially partaking in cannabis on a more widespread basis, or a more open basis anyhow. And we have a lot of employment lawyers who are trying to advise our existing, business clients on, how they can handle situations, which can vary all the way from, this is a little annoying and I'm sort of suspicious, to, I've got somebody who's, driving a 50-ton item of machinery, and if they make a mistake, people could get killed. What's the impact on employers in dealing with employees where they suspect that there may be cannabis use issues going forward?
That's very interesting. Obviously, my next question is, as an employer, do you have any rights? To me, it would be scary to have somebody sitting next to me that's smoking MJ or cannabis or whatever.
Yeah.
Especially if he or she is operating a machine. But yet, it seems, if I've seen the law correctly, and that we've had other people on, it's all over the place about whether you can discharge them or change their jobs even because of it.
Well, I mean, and it is an area that's going to evolve and get, needs to get clearer with time, because it's not entirely clear right now. Generally speaking, employers can ban smoking on their sites currently. There's already pretty much every business doesn't allow you to smoke on their location. And so that will continue, and that would apply to cannabis or MJ as much as tobacco. So there is that. To the extent that employers had the ability to do drug testing, that's not per se going to change. Whatever rights they had before this, they still have. The question becomes more, what do you do with the results? And that's a little bit murky at the moment. And there's also, and this is, I don't know how this is going to work, but somehow when people are putting together the laws, they thought this made sense. There's going to be a position where somebody is trained to detect adverse cannabis impacts in people. And that's part of their job description, is they've been specially trained to detect this. And if you're just a general person at your business and you say, hey, I think you're high, stop doing this or do that, you may not be the authorized person, but there can be a specially trained cannabis detector who looks for subtle signs and has special training, and they can have authority to say, you can't get on that forklift. So there is some kind of procedure that's out there that's going to be able to stop people from doing things if there's reasonable suspicion here. But how exactly that's going to work, I don't know.
Well, my next question is, across the country, it's almost impossible to not make a profit in marijuana. As I always point out, it's a weed. But yet, and what we've discovered over the time is that 90% of all failures in this industry come about because of malfeasance or some sort of. How do you help your clients because you're handling so much cash? It's such a natural temptation. Are you examining this and looking at this area at all?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have procedures in place to monitor the intake of cash and where that cash is going, also to monitor your inventory and where that inventory is going and make sure everything is carefully tracked. Like you say, there is, historically a temptation in cash businesses that maybe people don't report entirely all their income, that some things don't quite make it into the books. And, particularly when you're in a situation where the tax code won't let you take deductions for your operating expenses, there's going to be even more pressure on people, to move in that direction. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to stay in this business, and like you say, it is a business that has a lot of potential for profit. So it's a good business to stay in. If you start cutting corners and don't put in careful procedures and protocols that make sure it tracks all the cash, every penny, every bit of inventory, intense security, make sure your building is secure itself, video equipment, alarm systems. You're going to have all of that, and you're not going to be able to operate if you don't have all that in place. And the state wants to see serious protocols for all those types of things, and then make sure that you're actually following them. But like you say, there is always a temptation when there's a lot of cash flying around that, a couple dollars somehow disappears.
But also, that isn't it the requirement that you really have to account for every leaf almost in the MJ highway system?
Yeah, absolutely. The state is aware of this issue and this potential concern, and they want careful tracking of all inventory, everything that's done, exactly, by lot number, so you can track exactly, what was done with this leaf and where it ended up and who got it, who purchased it. And you also need that just from a, public safety position, because if, God forbid, something goes wrong with one of these batches and it makes people sick, or a horrible case for some reason, it's infected with something and kills somebody, you want to be able to trace exactly where that came and where it came from, who touched it, who had anything to do with it. And so careful procedures have to be in place, from the time you have a seed to the time that there's a package delivered to somebody, and tracking where those leaves are at every moment.
Well, let me ask you another question. Is there an opportunity for investment for people in this industry? Well, let's stay in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. There will be. And we'll have to see exactly how all this plays out. But New Jersey did recognize when they came out with these regulations last week that there is room for investors to come in and to help capitalize some of these companies. They just want to make sure that the investors' deal is open and papered in a full and open way, so that everybody understands who's involved. There'll have to be, appropriate checks on, the background of people who are investing as well. But there is opportunity there. There may be, some limitations where they want to make sure that, ultimately management decisions get made by the people who are supposed to be the owners, and that the investors are not purely ghosting and operating this business. But and that's particularly in the case where you qualified to get to the top of the pile because, let's say, you were a women business enterprise or a disabled veteran business enterprise. They want to make sure that that's not, they got three people together to be at the front, and then some, wealthy white guy put up, $1 million, and he's really calling all the shots behind the scene. They want to make sure that these businesses are what they purport to be, but there is opportunity for investors to come in to participate, but they may not be able to, fully call the shots as much as in some cases they might like to do.
Well, your website again for people and how they can reach you?
It's lindaberry.com, www.lindabur.com.
You've got about a minute and a half. Well, how would you like to leave our audience?
Well, I mean, I think this is an exciting opportunity. I think that this will be an entirely new industry that we've never had before in this state. And I think it's a trend that a lot of states are going to continue to follow. New Jersey was the 18th. I have no reason to think we're going to be the last. I think this is going to, little by little, different states have different views on the issue and, maybe slower than others to open this up. But I think it's a revenue stream for both businesses and for the government. And I think over time, this is going to move across the country, and little by little, I think there's going to be pressure at the federal level to take away the federal penalties on this and leave it up to the states to actually regulate as they see fit. So that one state wants to make it criminal, they can do that. But if New Jersey or Colorado want to make it legal, they'll be able to do that as well.
Bob Anderson, thank you so much for joining us. It's been illuminating.
No, it's been great to talk to you, Don.
Hold on.